Well, Candy and I are absolutely delighted to be here with you this evening. We've been in North Carolina a lot lately. It's one of the places where a lot of people have common sense, and it's a nice thing to see. And now, America is such a beautiful place, and we're all so incredibly lucky to be members of this society. And every time I go traveling somewhere else in the world, and a lot of times they're beautiful places, I'm always so glad to be back home.
Yes.
The beauty of this place is absolutely magnificent. And it's still a land of dreams. It's a place that other people try to come to. You don't see a lot of people trying to escape from here. And yet you have all those people talking about how horrible it is. Well, why are they still here? Why don't they just leave? They're not going anywhere, you know? But there is trouble in the land. There's no question about that. And one of the things that I see as the most troubling is the intimidation that comes about to our normal peace-loving American citizens. They're being intimidated by the PC police. And I dislike the PC police enormously. I'm a nice person and I like most people, but I don't like the PC police because they are shutting people down. And you look at how they try to create so much division. You know, there's a war on virtually everything. There's a war on women, which is a total farce. There's a war on age, on race, income, religion, you name it. There's a war on it. Somebody's trying to create friction. But I personally believe that it is intentional. Because they want us to believe that our society doesn't work. And it ripens us for the thought of a fundamental change. But we don't need a fundamental change. What we need to do is recognize that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. The enemies are those people who are trying to divide us. And they're intimidating us into silence. That's what they want. They don't care whether you disagree with them. That doesn't bother them at all. Just shut up. Don't say anything. Don't say this word. Don't. Just keep your mouth shut, and we won't call you names, and we won't ridicule you, and we won't give you an IRS audit, and we won't do any of these kinds of things. Just shut up, be quiet. But you know what? Unless we the people are willing to stand up for what we believe in, we will lose our nation. We cannot let that happen. It's up to us. But what will really be required is not so much me, because it's not about me. It's about us. It's about we, the American people, and whether we make the decision that we are going to take control of our nation. Because you see, this nation was designed around us. It was supposed to be of, for, and by the people, not of, for, and by the government. And the government is supposed to conform to our will, not us to the will of the government. Well, you know, there were a lot of problems for me. I wanted to be a doctor, but, you know, that looked like a pretty remote dream. Or maybe it would have been a remote dream in any place except America. You know, we were desperately poor. You know, after my parents got divorced, you know, because my mother was one of 24 kids. got married when she was 13 and subsequently found out that her husband was a bigamist, and she had to raise us by herself. And there was never any money for anything. And we would go to the store, and my brother and I would, at the checkout, we'd see the chewing gum or the bubble gum, and I said, Mother, can we get this? And the answer was always the same, we don't have money for that. And she wanted to get it for us, but she couldn't. And the look in her eyes of pain was so significant that pretty soon we just stopped asking. We don't want to see that look anymore. I'll tell you the interesting thing. My mother, with the little money that she had, she knew how to stretch it. She could stretch every dollar. She would go to the Goodwill and buy a pair of trousers with a big hole in the knee. Back before that was fashionable. And then she would buy some patches and put it on there. And people would be saying, where did you get those pants? Those are so cool. And she would take us out in the country on Sunday morning, knock on farmers' doors and say, can we pick 4 bushels of your apples or corn or beans? And 3 for you and 1 for us. Well, they always liked that deal, and she would then bring the stuff home and she would can it and just stretch that dollar further than anybody could imagine. And I'm certain that if my mother were the Secretary of Treasury, we would not be in a deficit situation. Because she had common sense. And she passed that along to me because I am extremely, I wouldn't say cheap, but my wife said she would. I just don't like to waste money. The concept of wasting money bothers me tremendously. And that's why when I look out and I see what's happening with our government, it bothers me. Our government has 330 million square feet of office space that they don't use. And yet, they lease from the private sector 180 million square feet. Think how silly that is. I mean, that's just one example. I can go down a list that would blow you away in terms of government waste, and I will be speaking out on that list when and if I decide that I'm going to make an announcement. Because so much of the problem that we face is one of fiscal irresponsibility. We have a national debt of over $18 trillion. And that's what we are laying on the next generation. I mean, how can we in good conscience do that? And I'm not even talking about the unfunded liabilities. They were talking 100 to 200 trillion dollars. And yet, it's not as grim as it seems. If we would stop immediately accumulating debt. We need to have a balanced budget amendment, no spending. And we need to shrink the size of government because, so is it possible that we can get it under control? Well, remember, we are the possessors in this country of the most powerful economic engine the world has ever known. And all we have to do is let it loose. Now, what is keeping it bound down? Regulations. Incredible regulations. Every month, new regulations around business, industry, academia, every single portion of our society encumbered by regulations. This morning I was in Orlando speaking to the American Bakers Association. And I asked the leadership, are you guys having any trouble with excessive regulation? That was a really funny question. They said, we are being cremated by it. But I asked that to every group, because I get the same answer with every group. This is America. This is a place where people came to escape government interference with every aspect of their lives. Our country has been blessed with enormous amounts of energy. On 3% of the land, we're very close to being the #1 oil producer in the world. We are the #1 producer of natural gas, and we can liquefy it now, which means we can export it. But we have these archaic energy exportation rules that preclude us from doing it. We have to reach a point where we're not paralyzed so that we can do logical things. What happens if we can sell all that energy? And as our fracking techniques improve, we have access to enormous amounts of oil. I mean, we don't ever have to worry about running out of it for hundreds of years. But the other thing is, because we're developing it, doesn't mean that we can't also develop alternative energy sources, renewable energy sources, green energy sources. You know, why do we have to set these two things up as enemies? You know, we can use our oil and natural gas to fund the development of renewable energy sources. We can do more than one thing at a time. And stop listening to those people who try to make everybody into enemies. You know, as far as, you know, global warming, global cooling, climate change, whatever you want to call it, is concerned, it really doesn't matter whether that's happening or not. What matters is that we are responsible stewards of the environment, and we're going to take care of it because we have to pass it on to the next generation. But we're not going to be absolutely stupid about it. We're going to utilize the EPA to work with business, industry, and academia to find the safest, cleanest, most efficient ways to develop our energy, protect our environment, and protect our future at the same time. Also, think about the bigger picture. You know, Mr. Putin is a pretty ambitious guy. Now, fortunately for us, his ambitions have been capped largely by economic woes because the price of oil has fallen so dramatically. That's a good thing. We can make it worse for him by developing our energy resources and making Europe dependent on us instead of him. And we also should be looking to achieve global dominance in energy production because we have so much. And think about the impact that that can have on radical Islamic terrorists. Think about that. And there are some other things that can be done with energy in their part of the world also. You know, when it comes to fighting forces like ISIS and some of the other radical Islamic extremist terrorists, we have to understand something. Whether we made a mistake by invading Iraq more than a decade ago is irrelevant. Because Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda of 10 to 15 years ago is nothing compared to what we're facing now. And we need to understand that they are not the same. So people who are afraid to get involved because of what happened then have very little understanding of the danger that we face. These are people who want to destroy us and our way of life. And they are growing by leaps and bounds. And all we're doing is bombing the desert and thinking that that's doing something to them. We have to be smart enough to recognize that we need to eliminate them. That's the only thing. We've got to learn from our mistakes. We cannot live in isolation. And we have to learn how to lead. Because if you lead, you find yourself in fewer conflicts. That's what Ronald Reagan meant when he said, peace through strength. Right now, our military is incredibly weakened. You know, our Navy is as small as it's been since 1970. We're carving the heart out of our personnel. These are things that are very dangerous. We're weakening ourselves at the same time that our enemy who wants to destroy us is getting stronger. We are setting up the perfect storm for the overthrow of this nation. Don't allow yourself to be manipulated into thinking that there is a professional class that needs to be in charge. There is no professional class that needs to be in charge. It is us, the people, that need to be in charge. Wisdom and the ability to get things done is much more important than spending many, many years in politics. You know, some people have unfairly criticized me, saying, well, you grew up in poverty, you benefited from some government programs, and now you want to get rid of them. Well, you know, my mother worked 2 to 3 jobs at a time, leaving the house at 5 in the morning, getting back after midnight, day after day, because she didn't want to be on welfare. Because she was smart. She only had a third grade education, but she noticed that no one she saw go on welfare, or very few, ever got off of it. And she didn't want to be dependent. And she occasionally accepted some aid, but for the most part was able to stay off of it. And she didn't want us to be dependent either. And I don't want people to be dependent either. You know, I want them to move up. And that's why what I've advocated is not just removing the safety net and letting people fend for themselves, as some people would try to characterize me. That is absolutely not what I would advocate. But what I would advocate is that we examine what we have done as a nation. You know, it started in the 60s with Johnson and the Great Society programs and the war on poverty. And we started spending trillions upon trillions of dollars to eradicate poverty. And that's in quotations. Because what has happened? In 1969, 1.4% of the population was on food stamps. Today, more than 14%, tenfold increase. More crime, incarceration, out of wedlock births, broken family, poverty in general. Everything that was supposed to get better has gotten much worse. So now what do smart people do? They look at something like that is not working, and they say, wait a minute, maybe we need to re-examine this. Maybe there is a better way to do it. And I hope that's what everybody in here is thinking. We do not need to be sending people to Congress who are saying, there, you poor little thing, and patting people on the head and saying, we're going to take care of all your needs. Because all that does, it makes people more dependent. That is an unkind thing to do. It is just the opposite of being compassionate. And what we need to be looking at is what can we do to invest in our fellow Americans. We are our brother's keeper. The Bible tells us that we have a responsibility to the downtrodden, and it is our job to take care of them, not the job of the government. The next time you sing the national anthem and you look at this beautiful flag, and you get to the end of that first stanza, and you see those words, land of the free, home of the brave. Don't just let those words roll off your tongue. Think about what they mean and recognize that we cannot be free if we're not brave. Thank you.
All right, so what would you like to say to Dr. Carson?
Just thank you for helping my mom out with her accident. So it's really helped my family a lot.
I just think Dr. Carson's great. I brought all of my kids here tonight. They've seen his movie, but to see somebody who has such an extraordinary story is amazing. And I'll tell you what, to see a man with that kind of brilliance and also have that kind of humility, that is what we desperately need in this country.
Dr. Carson, I'd really like to thank you for coming to Winston-Salem. And I also want to just thank you for bringing common sense to our country, for being a Christian and being proud of being a Christian.
I thought that Dr. Carson was good. I liked the way how he presented everything very calm and relaxed. So yeah, I think he has a lot of good ideas, and it's nice that he knows America's history.
And I do want to say that I have never been politically active because I've never felt that there's been someone that truly speaks to how I feel. And so that it's nice to know that I am not alone and there's somebody out there that feels the same way I do. And it's given me excitement to know that we can take this country back.
I would like to say that tonight's speech was amazing. You couldn't hear a pin drop in that entire room. Everybody was spellbound.
All right, so what would you like to say to Dr.
I pray
Carson?
that he continues to be led of the Lord in his decision making. I know he'll make the right decision.
Dr. Carson, I just want to thank you for inspiring the next generation, for showing them that education and not making excuses is a very valuable thing. I appreciate you teaching us that.
Dr. Carson, that was the most profound speech I've ever heard in my life, and I do pray and hope that you will run for president of our country and change things in this country for the better.
The fact that he is not a career politician and that he's bringing this stance of common sense and self-reliance and help, but also helping each other, just a common sense view of what's wrong with the world today and how we can be the front runners and the leaders to help fix that problem. And that kind of common sense and that kind of courage, that's something America needs right now. So I throw my support to Dr. Ben Carson.